All right, Better Man fam, we are back for another week of the Better Man podcast. There's a crisis. There's a crisis of identity and responsibility facing men today. But God's word hasn't changed. He gave us a clear design for what manhood is. It's rooted in purpose, love, truth, integrity. And today, I'm joined by some fathers who were in the trenches, and they're in the trenches with me. We're raising sons. We're loving our families and learning to walk with God. Today, we're going to be diving into what it means to live out biblical manhood and how we can pass the torch to the next generation. So to my guest, I have Elton Briggs, who is my son's basketball coach. He is a man of faith. He's a man of character. He's a man of integrity. I'll kind of let Elton speak to some of his vocational expertise in a minute. Longtime friend Courtney Walker, Dr. Courtney Walker. I can't say anything bad about him. Just a great friend, a great brother. And I'm grateful to know you. And my buddy, my neighbor, longtime friend Montrell Hill, who is probably the financier. How do you pronounce that word? The finance guy of the group. He loves his family well. He provides well. And he's just a great brother. And so tonight, we're going to be jumping in. Obviously, everything that we talk about from the Better Man perspective is based on the 4 W's, which is what we believe the definition of biblical masculinity is. And it comes straight out of the book of Genesis. We believe that those 4 W's are this: a better man courageously follows God's word. He loves, protects, and serves God's woman. He excels at the work that God has given him, regardless of what that work is. And he betters the world primarily through his children, his church, and his community. So tonight, we're just going to have a discussion about one of the things that we're doing this summer with our sons. And so most of us on this call or this podcast have gone through the Better Man curriculum in some form or another. So with that being said, we're adding an additional resource, a book by Eric Mason called Manhood Restored. And we're taking our sons through the 8 chapters of that book along with Better Man. So as we move forward tonight, guys, give a quick introduction of who you are, and we'll jump into the Better Man podcast.
Who you want to start?
It don't even matter. Jump in. Age before beauty.
So I think that would be me. I think I got Courtney by a little while.
Yeah, I think you do.
By my 50th will be in August. So I think yours will be later this year.
December.
So. Yep. All right. So my name is Elton Briggs. I am professor of marketing at UT Arlington and department chair, and have known Delario, I guess, since we joined Grace Prep, and Courtney, and then soon after Montrell, as on the side. It's probably about 4 years ago. When my son's going to junior, my son's going to the junior year now. I have 2 sons, Ernest and Andrew. One is a rising junior, one is a rising freshman. And looking forward to this study. Had a chat with Delario about it over a Starbucks refresher today. And I think this is going to be a great study, and it's going to be very beneficial for our families.
So I'll jump in here next since I'm December turning 50. My name is Courtney Walker. I'm a doctor of pharmacy. I work for Novo Nordisk, a drug company specializing in diabetes, cardiovascular disease. I worked in the pharmaceutical industry for over 20 years. I've been friends with Delario as my brother for 20 years. We were in discipleship together, and I am a blessed husband of Jocelyn, and I have 4 beautiful kids. I have 1 son who's my oldest, who's 16 years old, and just enjoying the journey of doing what I believe the Lord has called me to do as a husband and a father. And it's an honor to be with you guys tonight.
Let's go.
All right. Hey, Montrell Hill, last but not least, but been knowing Delario for about 15 years. And great brother, as well as the rest of these brothers right here. I've met them over the years as well. So my son, he is going to be a sophomore. And then I have a 6-year-old daughter. And so, but yeah, definitely excited to learn more here with these brothers right here who are great fathers. So glad to be here.
Yeah, man, I sure appreciate you, man. So we're going to start by, again, we mentioned that we're doing a study with our sons over the next 8 weeks on BetterMan as the foundation, but Eric Mason's book, Restoring Manhood. My first question to the group is, I reached out to you guys via text, and all of you said yes. What made you say yes to this conversation, and why does this topic personally matter? And anybody can jump in. Let's just talk.
I'll jump in.
Let me just tell you why I asked the question. Because one, we live in a different generation in which we grew up, right? Everything nowadays is technology. And technology has even interrupted friendships and the way that we communicate with one another. And so as I, am raising boys and read through their text messages and how they communicate with one another, just watching them and how they communicate in life. One, it's my job, right, to teach them what biblical masculinity is. But two, I just wanted to do this together with other believing brothers. I thought it was so important because I noticed a lot of times when it comes to our boys and their communication, a lot of times they don't want to talk. They don't want to open up. They don't want to tell us things unless there's food involved or unless their buddies are around. And so I just thought it would be great to literally tag team this topic of manhood together so that our boys would also feel comfortable, one, talking because they do these things with their friends, and two, so that they will get the same perspective, but from different men. That's extremely important so that I don't look like the bad guy who is singing one song, but now they know that Montrell, Courtney, and Elton are singing the exact same song with their boys. So that's why one of the reasons it was really important to want to do this summer with our boys. And as they're getting older, right, they're going to encounter things that are totally different than what they encountered last year. All of our boys, with the exception of one, are sophomores. So life is beginning to change, and it's beginning to change quick. And so I just wanted to make sure that we stay on top of the way we teach, train, and prepare them for this next season of life.
I love the title of the book, Delario. I thought the book was phenomenal just in terms of manhood restored. I think that there is a lot of confusion as to what manhood is and what it isn't. I think there's this term toxic masculinity that is talked about in our culture now, but really I think is a confusion because, I think they confuse what biblical masculinity is and attribute what we grew up kind of understanding men to be in terms of leaders and assertive and taking care of their families and standing up for what was right. So I thought it was great for my son and myself to be a part of other men and other sons in the redefinition of masculinity. And I love how Pastor Mason is doing this in his layout in terms of what the definition of manhood is. One of my favorite books, Steve Farrar, Point Man, he talks about that masculinity only comes from masculinity. So, masculinity can only be taught from other men, poured into to men now currently. And I need all the help I can get in helping my son to be in his construction process, because there is a limit sometimes to what your son will listen to from you. And you need to put other men around that he will listen to, because familiarity kind of breeds contempt in a sense. And so you have to be able to put other men around to reiterate and reinforce what it is you're trying to teach your son. So it's an honor to kind of be around you guys and how you reiterate and reinforce maybe some of the things that I've been saying. He'll listen to it differently because Mr. Delario said it, or Mr. Elton said it, or Mr. Montrell said it or communicated it. So I felt it was definitely something that was worth investing our time. And I'm really enjoying the book so far. So,
yeah. Montrell, what made you say yes to this conversation?
I think for the most part, I sort of feel like I'm behind in certain areas. And so, just being around you guys and just watching, how you guys interact with, your children and so forth. So that's kind of give me an opportunity to learn more in some areas that I don't really feel like I'm on point as much as I should be. And so definitely this is an opportunity to do it with someone versus having to do it on my own, being able to learn in the process. And then to piggyback on what Courtney said, if they hear it from me, then they also hear it when he's hanging out with you or your boys and so forth. And that kind of that same thing, that reiteration over and over. So, and it's also going to appear that it's okay, especially if my friends are saying it as well. So,
Yeah. And that's good. And Montreal, I need to say something to you too. There are a lot of men who may not feel like they are where they need to be. And the purpose of this friendship, this relationship, this brotherhood is if you fall, we're there to pick you up. So real talk, no podcast face. You already know that. But this is a collective effort for all of us to raise our boys and raise them well, to raise them in the fear and admonition of the Lord, to teach them what godly masculinity looks like. So you are not alone. And there are men listening to this podcast right now who have those same sentiments. And so it's okay. Some of us may be further down the road, but what's not okay is if we leave you in the ditch.
correct.
Yeah.
Agree.
Elton, why'd you say yes, E?
A couple of reasons. Our boys have built a friendship with one another, and I think they respect each other. And I just know that if you feel like you're the only one that is having to walk a certain way, it can be really tough. And the world could convince you that there's no point in it. And so I'm excited about going through this study and having our boys build some bridges together with one another, and over prayerfully, even as they grow older, they have that relationship and that foundation and that other person that they can give a shout, when things are rough, that has a similar foundation. And also, I can't. I had a conversation, I think, with I think you might have mentioned it, Courtney, a few weeks ago, and you're talking about the suicide rate for males has increased in recent years because men have kind of lost their purpose a little bit in the world, and so that just has stuck with me, and that kind of thought has stuck with me. And so when Delario followed up and wanted to start this, it's like, yes, let's do this. This is a priority for me at this point in life.
Yeah. And the conversation we had today, was definitely evidence of that. And one of the questions that we had a chance to sit down and ask the boys today was, what kind of example of manhood are they growing up with? And they gave some great examples. And it really, really gave me some hope, because every example that the three boys gave us today that was with Elton and I, Dylan, I thought the image of a man was someone who is strong, a person who takes care of their body, someone who's able to protect their family. And he said, I just remember walking into the garage watching you work out. And so that's one of his core memories in terms of what he believes manhood is. Right, wrong, and different, right? That's what he remembers. That's what he sees. Drew was loyalty, taking care of your family, being at home, and Andrew, same thing, very similar to Drew's. A man goes to work, he takes care of his family, he comes home, might even take a quick nap on the sofa before bedtime. But, just his view of what manhood has been shaped by what he sees in terms of his father and men like us. And one of the things that I shared with the boys is, guess what? We talked about all the ills of our society, all of the brokenness, but none of our boys are experiencing fatherlessness because we're home. We're in the homes. I said, that's one thing you don't have to experience. And so it was just a real interesting conversation. But Elton, I'm gonna have to call you out here. Elton shared something today that has probably shaped him and has probably made him the husband he is today by the example that he saw in his dad. And I've got chills now just thinking about what he said. Elton, if you don't mind, I would love for you just to kind of share some of the things you shared earlier today, if you're good with that.
Sure, I give a shot. Sometimes I get emotional thinking about it. So
Yeah.
I do my best with it. But I was just telling we were talking about examples of manhood, and I just told him that when I was growing up, my father was kind of old school. He didn't say a lot, and so I grew up with the image that man kind of does stuff, but doesn't really say a lot. But um, sometimes with that, comes some uncertainty. Oftentimes, you don't get that sometimes assurance all the time. And I just told that I just conveyed that the best image that I saw of manhood was my mother passed away when I was 23 of breast cancer. Um, and a lot of that burden for taking care of her fell on my father. She was going through an illness. And so I would just remember how my father devoted his days to taking care of her, making sure she got to her appointments. I mean, he didn't want to have to stay anywhere, put a hospital bed that could recline in the house where she was dealing with treatments, and made sure that we got some family time in, some trips, when things weren't looking so well. And um, I kind of thought my dad loved my mom and loved our family, but that example, sorry, sorry, it's out of trouble. Good, you good? But that example of love, really showed me what manhood was, and what it means for a man to be committed to his family and to his wife, um, in better or worse. And it's left the image to what the commitment, what it means to be committed as a man today.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome, man. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think that was one of the other questions was there a moment when you realized that being a man was deeper than age, muscles, or paycheck, right? It was deeper than uh, how old you were, how strong you were, or how much money you made. And so for you, man, watching your dad, right, probably the hardest moment of his life, take care of your mom, like honored his vows, did exactly what scripture called him to do. Was there a moment for either of you other guys when you realized being a man was bigger than what the world had told you it was?
I think for me, in my father not being here when I was little, my grandfather, I was raised by my grandparents. My grandfather died when I was 8 years old. Um, I think as I was growing in my relationship with Christ, God was showing me what a father was supposed to be. And I knew I aspired to the biblical model. I aspired to the biblical model of what manhood really, really was. And I knew that my father not being there, that I didn't want to replicate that example. Um, and I wanted more. I wanted God's absolute best. So I relate so much to what Montreal, the way you said what you said, in terms of, the feeling of the realization of my inadequacies, but God kind of filled in the gaps. There was a gentleman, Mr. Huckabee, that filled in the gap for me. And God is so gracious that even the fact, though I didn't have it, he put the men in my life to kind of give me a picture. And Mr. Huckabee was a man who helped my mom and I when we had a tire blowout on the side of the road back in 1987. And it was right before I moved to Texas with my mom in 1988. And we maintained that relationship. And that dude became like a second father. So every Father's Day, I call him, I send him cards. And, I'm 40, right, about to be 50 years old. And I thank him. He included me with every, teams he coached. He came to all my football games. He came to my wedding. Um, wow. Um, Wow. He didn't have to do that. You know what I'm saying? So I feel an obligation to your sons. When I see your sons, if y'all notice, I'm the dude. What's up, Andrew? What's going on, Ernest? What's going on, Dylan? What's going on? Connecting with those young men, because it was a man that connected with me who wasn't my father. And that person helped, me ultimately become who I became. And so that just lets me know that every man can make a difference.
Yeah.
So for me, I knew that my life was not just about myself. And I think that's really the essence of manhood. It's not just about you. You know what I'm saying? Because what about when God calls you to care for someone else? And ultimately, I think, even in your example, Elton, of what you just shared, that's the ultimate example of sacrifice, where you're willing to lay down yourself for the benefit of somebody else. And that's ultimately what manhood, what fatherhood, what husbandry is really all about.
Yeah. So one of the things that Eric argues is that true manhood died in the garden, right? And he talked about when Adam abdicated the responsibility, failed to lead, it became passive. And so as a result, the legacy of manhood in every generation has been marked by a few things: brokenness, absent fathers, emotional detachment, addiction, aggression, and insecurity. Which one of those do you think has impacted your life the most, right? The brokenness of an absent father, emotional detachment, addiction, aggression, or insecurity. And anybody can jump in anytime. And listen, some of you had dads at home, right? Maybe they were not perfect, but there was a level of brokenness that we've all experienced, um, you know, in our walk and in our lives. So
Yeah. That's what I can probably touch on because my father was in the house, he passed away when I was 27. And, of course, I didn't know anything outside of what I grew up in, but my dad was a truck driver. So he was never at home, even though he was at home. And so a lot of it, was me just watching. He was a provider, but I think there was a lack of, having the time to spend with us children. I have two brothers and, my mom. So that's kind of my viewpoint from it. And then as I got older, as he passed away, then I realized there was a lot of stuff that was left out, opportunity that, wasn't there, but I didn't realize it because that was my norm, even though when I see other things later, then it's like, okay, well, I did miss a lot of things, so yeah, so that's kind of my perspective. And also when my dad passed away, just me having to step up because my dad took care of everything, as far as finances go and bills. And so because I was watching him in the background, I was able to easily pick all that up
yeah,
and be able to do that and then help my mom and show her how that is so she could take over as well. So which kind of made me, stronger as a man and so forth. Obviously, don't want to go through that same type of trauma, but just knowing that, you step up at the time of, because my dad went to work and he just never came back home. So yeah.
and see, Montreal, I think the interesting about that too is, you know, even though our fathers, our earthly fathers, were not perfect, all is not lost, right? Because of the things that he taught you specifically about bills, providing and taking care of your family, you're one of the best providers that I know. So if there is a lack just in terms of your confidence in what you're doing as a dad, or if it's gospel centered or whatever it is, the things that you feel like you may be lacking, well, your dad didn't leave you completely, you know, out to fry, right? He gave you some things that you have excelled at and right that you have taught me in. And so that's why I think it's super important for us to come alongside one another, because you have a level of strength that I don't have. And I may have a level of strength that you don't have. And so I think that God can use us both in the lives of our own sons, you in the life of my sons and me in the life of your son, just in different ways. And it hopes that those things will help round them out. The message is central, right? Christ first. But everything else, boy, when it comes to money, boy, hey, you need to go talk to Montreal because he can help you in areas and educate you in ways that I just can't. Courtney can talk to you in ways about medicine and pharmacy, and Elton, from an education perspective, this is the route that you should go. And so I just think that, if we look at this as a family, as communal, we're working together to raise our boys, right, to be good husbands to somebody's wives.
And I'm gonna throw this in here, and Delario, I'm so glad you did. What you just did was really give Montreal a virtual pat on the back. I don't think we do a good job of celebrating men in our culture, or celebrating, the fact that we're doing a good job. I think, we just don't. You look at the difference between Mother's Day and Father's Day. Mother's Day is the second most highly celebrated and paid for holiday. I think Father's Day is like 20th or 27th. It's somewhere around there.
Yeah, after Halloween. Father's Day after Halloween.
Oh, after Halloween. Yeah, all day long. And dude, if it wasn't for fathers, bro, this joker wouldn't run. If it wasn't for it wouldn't go. So, and going back to what Elton said about the suicide rates regarding men, why is that? Because isolation, Proverbs 18:1 says, a man isolates himself, seeks his own destruction. Why do many men isolate? Because many men don't dig in deep to say, hey, brother, are you doing okay? Are you doing all right? And then some of those men have never been affirmed. And Elton made me think about the men that we grew up around. They were very quiet. They didn't say a lot, and I think that was good, but I also think it was bad too, because those guys didn't communicate. There was nobody in their grill. There was nobody saying, hey, brother, you okay? Hey, I just want you to know, man, you do a phenomenal job. So I agree with Delario to celebrate Montreal. You are one of the most brilliant financial guys I know, and I never knew your story. I never knew about your father. So to hear that, that's like, oh my gosh, that makes sense.
Makes
now.
sense. Yeah.
It totally makes sense, because we ultimately become the sum total of what we observed, but we also are motivated by the absence and the need, and I'm looking at, and I'll tell you guys something. I look at my son sometimes. I wonder if he's really listening, and certain things along the way God shows me by something that somebody said that my son did it. I'm like, oh my gosh, he is listening. He hears me, even though in the moment it feels like, boy, you ain't paying attention to nothing I'm saying, but he's getting it, So I just I appreciate that, Delario, you giving him that virtual pat on the back, because we need it, man. We need it, because it's, you don't always get the praise and acknowledgement, and that's okay, but we can give it to each other.
Yeah, 100%, man. And that kind of goes into my next question, Courtney, after what you said. So again, feel free to jump in here. But why do you think so many men today feel stuck, passive, or confused about their role?
I'm gonna be honest. I think that we live in a society that feminism started in the 1960s, and I'm thankful that women have made great strides, but I think that the strides have gone so far that boys and men have been left behind. And I think especially boys. That's been proven academically, that's been proven through education. Elton and I talked about it, about 60 to 70% of college is female. I think so many boys right now have an invisible question mark. They don't know their purpose. They don't know who they are. And then we mature differently. Girls mature faster and earlier than boys. And so I think boys are just being forgotten. So I think there's a passivity because we are not cherishing the gift, without excluding females, because I'm thankful for females, but I'm thankful for my son. I'm thankful for young men, because I understand the call. Men take care of the infrastructure. If you don't have men, you don't have bridges, and you don't have, think of the rescue that's going on down in South Texas. That's mostly men giving of their bodies and their lives for the sacrifice of putting and reconstructing that area. And I just think manhood needs to be celebrated more. And it's easy to be passive when you don't understand the power of manhood and the need for manhood. And then the over focus on in the feminization of society. Most of our boys have female teachers. There's nothing wrong with that. But there's not always this connection with manhood and the celebration of it that reinforces the importance of it.
Yeah, Yeah. And I agree with that, Courtney, but I also would add that I think, that a lot of men feel passive, they feel stuck because they're ignorant. Like they don't know. Like they don't have no clue. And so no one has grabbed them by the shoulder and said, "Son, walk with me. Let me show you." Like what you said you experienced with Mr. Huckabee, you've told me that story 100 times, right? We need more Mr. Huckabees. We need older men who are willing to grab younger men by their shirt collar and say, "Young man, follow me. I know the way. Let me show you." And so that's just part of it. I do agree with everything else that you said. Times have changed. We made things right by doing right by women, but on the other side of that, men have been left behind. And so I just think it's up for us. It's up to us, and it's up to the older men in our churches and in our communities to help teach, train, and prepare these young men for what biblical masculinity is and what it looks like. So, Courtney, I have another question for you. What does walking with God look like for you right now? And where do you struggle? I wanted to have, and one of the things Elton and I talked about today, we had a real conversation with the boys. We laid it out on the table. And I said, we're going to do that. And we're going to do that in this call too. So what does walking with God look like for you right now? And where do you struggle?
I would say walking with God is just living in every aspect of my life, applying the relevancy of God and his person to all aspects of my life. So what I eat, what I drink, my relationship with my wife, my children, my job, my boss, my friends, my private time, everything that God is relevant to all those areas.
Yeah.
And, connecting with him and trying to be led by him. I would say my struggle is just consistency and maintaining a sense of depth in that area, in those areas, maintaining the right measure of depth, if you will. Is my relationship all that it can be in a moment with the Lord? And it's not about perfection, because I'm 49. I get it now. Nobody's perfect, but I'm also not excusing gross iniquity or gross sin either. You know what I'm saying? Because those vices can be deadly or devastating. An uncontrolled habit. If you have a habit in pornography, or you have a habit in sexual deviancy, or a habit in eating bad, those things can be detrimental to the furtherment of my family, the depth of relationship with my wife and my children, the respect in the community, all those things. So for me, I hope, just trying to walk with the Lord, and then also, figure out what God is doing in this season of life. Like this season of being in my late 40s is different than when I was in my 20s.
Yeah.
What I'm thinking about now, like I got 4 kids, graduating. I got a son that's about to graduate in 2 years. I'm not kidding, y'all. Every day it's like, dude, is he ready? Is he ready? I need to get this boy ready. I need to make sure financially he's ready. And my daughters, are they ready? Is he ready for a relationship? I think there was the passive approach that hurt us. I don't think we train young people well for relationships. And I think that's why we got jacked up marriages, because we do such a good job of saying, don't do this, don't do that, but we don't tell them what to do. So we don't tell them how to talk to a young lady. We don't tell our young ladies how to view themselves and how to talk to a young man, how to appreciate engagement. And the world is really teaching them that. So that's what I'm thinking about. I'm also thinking about, my call to the church. I'm a teaching pastor in my church. And, when I preach and teach, I want people to feel closer to Christ and want to be stronger and better in their relationship through my preaching and teaching when I have that opportunity. So it's just different, man, a different season financially. I want to do some unique things. I've been talking to Montreal about some ideas, and, so I love it's just a different season, man. So I'm sorry to be over long-winded.
No.
That's kind of what's going on.
You good. All right, fellas. So what has, in terms of manhood, what has loving your wife or the women in your life, what has that taught you about manhood? Anybody? Come on, somebody else. You look like you ready.
Well, for me, it's it's not always a smooth road, and oftentimes, um, even though we have needs and we have emotional needs, I was kind of to your earlier question. I thought that the emotional availability for me, it was one area that maybe I missed a little bit growing up and have a little bit of an issue with nowadays. And so for me, it's always been stability. It's always been okay. I understand that we have emotions, but my wife's emotions tend to be a little bit more, let's say, uh, volatile than mine are. And so I need to provide a little bit of a steadier line for the family when there are situations that are, challenging to the family. You know, how can I be a steadying voice and be a voice that kind of brings calm and assurance many times when there's a lot of challenging situations out there that are facing us. So for me, I think about my relationship with my wife that allows her to explore her emotions, to vent, to rant, and be free when she knows that even though she can do that, that there's going to be a pretty centered point to come back to in myself. Um, and so when I think about I guess there may be some variations in different families, in different roles. I definitely leave that open in that way. But when I think about my interaction with my wife, that's kind of how I feel like I add to or in our relationship, I'm able to kind of bring something to the table.
Oh yeah, you got it. So when I think the question was what has loving your wife or the women in your life taught you about manhood? Um, it's taught me that manhood is a weighty responsibility. It's a big responsibility. And so when a man takes on a wife, he's taking on all of her experiences, right? And she as well as him, right? She's taking on all of her experiences. But we've been called to a unique position. As we talked about a little bit earlier today, when Adam and Eve were in the garden, Adam sat by passively and watched because God had given him a responsibility, and Adam advocated that responsibility. And when God saw what took place, they hid and they were naked, but he did not call Eve. He called Adam. He said, Adam, where are you? And so it just reminds me that even if it's not my fault, it's still my responsibility. And so that right there just always reminds me that just like you said, I have to be the steady, calming force. I mentioned this on a podcast a couple of weeks ago, that it is our responsibility to be the thermostat, to set the temperature, and everything else adjusts according to the temperature that we set, but not to be a thermostat where we change based on the external temperature. And so that's what it's taught me, man. It is a weighty responsibility. It's my job to take care of my family. It's my job to love my family. It's my job to provide for my family. It's my job to lead my family. So I can ditch the excuses, which can be difficult. So I'm not knocking anyone who has had a difficult upbringing, because I've had one. But because of friends like Courtney Walker, whom I met 20 years ago, who showed me a completely different side of what biblical masculinity is, I don't know where I'd be today. And so that even leads to why this conversation is so important as well, and why we decided to do this, because we can't do it alone. And had I not met those guys then, I don't know where I'd be today. I don't know where I would be today.
D, I got to answer that question because Elton made me think of something. In answering that question, it made me realize that I desperately needed the capacity to be able to love my wife and my daughters. I think women require a level of depth and maturity that if you haven't done the work, it will be exposed. A woman will expose your inadequacies or the lack of preparation. Um, I will say that being a husband is the most humbling job I've ever had. And I don't mean that from a negative, but just a real it's a, because your wife is a mirror. You kind of see yourself, but at the same time, to be that steady, calm force, I have to know whose I am. I have to know who I am, and I have to live a life blameless, not perfect, but blameless, to where she will listen. And then where my girls are concerned, I have to have a different approach.
Yeah.
Where I reach um because they're smaller constructs of my wife. If you think about your girls, they're smaller constructs, and it's so funny. I'll share something. My oldest daughter and I had a moment. She was frustrated about volleyball yesterday, and we were communicating, and she had made a mistake, and I was correcting a mistake that she made, and she was just really upset. But it wasn't about what I was talking to her about. It was about volleyball. It was about what she was thinking about. And I had to patiently correct, but also say, "Hey, babe, what's wrong? Are you okay?" And she couldn't communicate it at the time. And I had to be okay. And I had to say, "Hey, this is an area where I want you to know you can open up and you can talk. I'm here, to help you. I'm not like your mom, but I am here to listen and help." And we got through that, and we went through the day. And late last night, she asked me to come to her room before she goes to bed. And she just wanted to apologize for what had happened earlier in the day and how she communicated. And she just wanted me to know she loved me. And there was something about how tender and how sweet that was. Bro, it's not easy. It's not easy, navigating the emotions, female emotions. So Elton, that's when you were talking about that. I get it, because I got my mother, who's a single mother, who was a single mother who's by herself, and I'm navigating a 70-year-old woman. I'm navigating my wife who's in the mid 40s, and then navigating these girls, and yeah, y'all pray my strength,
Man.
and just, I just realized I have to have the capacity. So y'all don't know how much of a blessing y'all are to me, because I think we're all in that journey to some capacity.
Yeah, that's real, man. That's real. Montreal, if you could sit down with your 15-year-old self for 60 seconds, what would you tell him about being a man?
That's tough. That's tough. I would say number one, obviously, to be strong, because there are so many people that are unable to do that. And I think that's a huge role that's needed for so many people, because it is, depending on upbringings and different things like that. A lot of times you might be in a group of people, and sometimes the entire group they're all weak. So somebody needs to be strong. And so, or even be the leader. And so I think, for me, that's one thing, to be able to, stand up and be strong for others, during their weaknesses, and be able to lead and guide them on, let's say what's needed, maybe comfort, things of that sort. So, that's probably the first thing, that comes to me. And then the second thing is more of being a leader, leading your family, into the direction that all of you agree upon. I wouldn't necessarily say that the man needs to decide where we're going and then everybody just follow. But, after that decision has been made, the man to be able to lead the family in that right direction, and be responsible for whatever happens. I think for me, that's kind of what that stands for myself. So yeah, leading my kids, my wife, and the family in general. And there are a lot of times where I've seen is it kind of spills over because maybe you have family members that are single, like Courtney said, and you find yourself having to sort of lead that direction as well and being strong. And sometimes I would only assume Courtney has to be strong for him and his mother's household, So, and I had to do that too when my father passed away, So, and then even my mom passed away as well. So being strong in both situations and having to handle all of that, in comparison to like my brothers doing it, being a leader and just stepping up to the plate and doing what's needed at that particular time. So,
Nah, that's good, man. Anybody else want to jump in on that? If you could talk with your 15-year-old self, yourself, not your kids, and give yourself a 60-second coach, what would you say?
That'd be pretty easy. I would tell my 15-year-old self that is not going to be about you. I know you think it is right now, but at 15 years old, it was all about me, and I was looking at life from a perspective of how I could enjoy it the most, how it could be most fun for me, most exciting for me. And now my 50-year-old self, almost 50-year-old self, I'm looking at it like, okay, it's really about, this is the family that God wanted me to lead. This is the wife that God wanted me to have. And so I'm speaking to a wife that God wanted me to have. I'm speaking to the kids that God wanted me to have. And not saying it's not a blessing, but it's not something that I crafted and created and set up for myself. And it's been a blessing to do what God has set before me rather than me trying to make something of my own.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah.
What did you preach to 15-year-old Walker?
Man, I love what Elton said. I mean, I couldn't have said it any better. I would tell my 15-year-old self, saddle up your horses. You got a trail to blaze. In the words of Stephen Curtis Chapman, one of my favorite songs is This Is the Great Adventure. Like God has an adventure in store for your life that you don't even know how big it is, but in order to get it, you got to be ready to die to yourself. It's not about you. I mean that's just perfect because but it's not about you, but that's okay. That's good. It's actually good, you know? And for me, like, it's almost emotional for me thinking about, because I was 15 in 1990 and I remember, you know, having a lot of questions and I kind of knew back then, I wanted to be a pharmacist. No, I think it was 1991, somewhere around there. So I was formulating kind of what I wanted for my future and my thoughts. But I would tell my 15-year-old self, get ready, man. This is going to be a fun ride, and you know, um, that song, talks about your leader keeping your focus on Jesus. He's going to take you to the great unknown, and this is the great adventure. I'm gonna have to listen to that song when I get off because that question made me think about it. And I think that's the problem with so many young people is that they have a limited view. They just live for the day. They live for the moment instead of being able to see, like, man, I'm really building the foundation for what my future is going to look like. And I'm doing that now,
Yeah. No, that's good. That's good. And, I think this has been great. And there's one final encouragement or challenge that I would like each of you to give to the men who are listening to this podcast. And I'll go first. And that encouragement and that challenge is this. One, reach out. As we mentioned, isolation, suicide rate. I think that men feel like they're alone. And we made this decision to do this together because we know that there's a benefit on the other side of it, right? There's a benefit for us as we carry one another. There's a benefit for our boys as they learn the true definition of biblical masculinity, as they learn from us. But there's also a benefit to the folks who are going to impact them, who our children will impact, who our children will be around. So there will be so many people impacted because of the work that we're doing today. So if you're a man and if you're at home and you feel alone or you feel stuck, reach out to someone. Reach out to someone. And then my other challenge is you've got a responsibility when it comes to your kids. You've got a responsibility specifically when it comes to, as it relates to what we're talking about, as it relates to your son. Take that seriously, because as we say, you don't know who you're raising. You could be raising the next president of this country. You could be raising the next pastor of this country. You could be raising the next pastor, in a local church that's going to change the country. You don't know who you're raising. And so God has given you the responsibility to raise your children in the fear and admonition of the Lord. And I would challenge every man who's listening to take that call seriously. And if you don't know how to do it, ask somebody. BetterMan has resources on our website, www.betterman.com. My email, my phone number is on there, so you can reach out to me. But my challenge is to reach out to someone and to take action. Courtney, Montreal, y'all lead us out in this one. Just what would be your encouragement challenge to the men who are listening?
I'll probably start off. I think for the people out there listening, don't necessarily feel like you're not at a certain place, or you feel like you can't provide value. You feel like you can't lead. You feel like you're not necessarily holding up your full part of the bargain. As Delario mentioned earlier, we're all in different places. Some people are on chapter 28. Some people are on chapter 8. Some people are just now getting started, and it doesn't necessarily matter what age. It mostly matters about you actually starting. And by you watching this video, that's obviously the first step, of even getting there and starting to look for, different ways or ideas of things that you can start doing today or tomorrow, as becoming, a man, leading, your children, being responsible for them and so forth. It doesn't matter where you're at, like I just mentioned earlier, a lot of times when I'm around these brothers, on this particular podcast, I feel like I'm so far behind, but that doesn't stop me from joining in, because every time I talk to each one of these brothers, I learn something. I learn another tip that I can go and implement tonight. And that's all the time. I hang out a lot with Delario, and he doesn't even know it, but I be watching him and I study him and I take notes all the time, I just try to implement as much as I can just to get closer to that destination of being or trying to be, perfect, even though no one is, but you still strive for it. So that's what I would suggest out there. It doesn't matter where you are, just speak up, reach out. Obviously you can reach out to the Better Man, comment down below or whatever it is, and just reach out to someone. At least that's how it gets started. And you'll be surprised. Most of the time when you reach out, you're surprised on how many people are overly ready to help or just to talk with you. So
that's good, Montreal.
In the 1800s and the early 1900s, the United States of America used a sign, and it had a man named Uncle Sam on the front, and it said, "I want you." And Uncle Sam was pointing through the poster, and it was used for military enlistment. It was a military enlistment strategy. And what I would say is that the God of the universe is pointing to every man, and all of us included, and saying he wants us. He wants us to know who we are. He wants us to fearlessly enlist in being a part of what manhood is supposed to be about, biblical manhood, loving our wives, doing the very best we can, loving our kids, encouraging one another, and being models of manhood. And one thing I love about what Montreal just said is, even though there's inadequacy he feels at times, he comes anyway. He's there anyway. And that's what we're supposed to do, because every man has some sense of inadequacy, but you fight through it. I think what they said is success is on the other side of fear. True success is is on the other side of fear. When you break through fear and you're successful, you defeated fear and doubt in order to attain success. So I just challenge every man to know the Lord wants you, and he is giving you the capacity to have a relationship with him. And through that relationship, you're going to find out who you are. And when you find out who you are, no devil in hell can take that away from you. No person can take that from you. And you can go fearlessly and fulfill your purpose. And, there's no greater call than husband and father. The greatest title of my life is not doctor. The greatest title of my life is not pharmacist. The greatest title of my life is husband and father. I really believe that. Because what's interesting, and I'm going to throw this out there, we're right now experiencing a significant tragedy in the state of Texas with the floods that took place down in South Texas. And to know that most of the deaths were babies, were young girls. As a father, that does something to me. Those are not my children, but because I have children, my heart, is compassionate for the families that have lost children. That didn't happen till I became a dad. I remember when I was a young dude and people would have kids around me, it wasn't relevant. I'd never changed the diaper. The first diaper I ever changed was my own kids, and so it opened my heart in a way. That's why I challenge young men to say, once you become a husband and father, you transform. You become what God intended you to become, and it unlocks an aspect of your manhood you didn't even know was there. So I would just say, man, God wants you, man, and just know that you have what it takes, and you got brothers to help you on the journey.
That's it. And what he calls you to, he'll equip you for. Yep. Elton.
And my encouragement would just be, the Bible says that his strength is made perfect in weakness. And so we all have those areas that, the word, I think you guys even just resonated with me when you guys use the word inadequacy. We all have those areas of inadequacy. And that's what community is for, is to help to overcome those areas of inadequacy, because you know what? I don't have to be the expert in everything. I can struggle in this because I can point you to this other man over here that does very well with it. And so I just encourage you, don't let those inadequacies prevent you from taking the first step towards being restored, towards walking in your manhood in a greater capacity. It's just a tool of the enemy to keep us from fulfilling and walking in strength. And so that'd be my encouragement. Don't let it stop you. Go ahead and step out on faith. And once you do, God will be able to work through you in a mighty way.
That's it. That's good. Good. Well, fellas, I am so grateful and I'm so appreciative that we're able to have this conversation tonight. And I look forward to when we complete this study and when we have this same conversation with the boys, and we'll get an opportunity to talk about their experiences. And so my hope is that, the men who are listening, the men who are watching will be encouraged by what we're doing as we attempt to really prepare our boys for this world. So anyway, I'm grateful for each one of you guys. BetterMan fam, I'm thankful for you. Until next time, we're out.